All right. Peace and greetings, YouTubers. So welcome to another edition of In the News. Let's just jump right into it. Now, of course, we're going to have to start out with coronavirus. And hopefully you guys are all doing well. I am worried about a few people, especially those who are older. I'm also worried about a lot of people who are in a position where they don't know if their job is secure. You know, I think that's one of the scariest things about when you're in this big giant period of uncertainty and there's something that has happened and nobody really has any answers. All we literally can do is, try to adjust and respond accordingly to whatever happens and try your best to prepare, which is a very, that's not something that makes people feel great. I think with what a lot of people are experiencing, at least in the United States, is that many Americans have always had this feeling of being exempt from whatever happens around the rest of the world, or they feel invincible because a lot of things that happen around the world never really quite take place in the United States, to the extent that it does in other places globally. And so I think that's why we're seeing some of the responses that we're seeing. Either you're seeing people who are going straight to like level 109 and they're karate chopping senior citizens over a roll of toilet paper and one step, or going to the gun shop and buying up every gun possible. Or on the other end of the spectrum, you have like the very young college students who feel invincible and they're just going to party like it's 1999 and that's all it is to it. Like, I don't know if you saw the clips, but of course it's spring break time period for a lot of the college students, so they've just been packing out the beaches. And I don't know if you saw the clip that I saw, but there was a clip. I'll try to post it on the side and hopefully they don't flag me for copyright. There was a clip where it's like the students talking about everything and they're like, yeah, Corona's Corona. If it's gonna happen, it's just gonna happen. Yeah, we just gotta live for the moment, man. Yeah, it's my birthday. I'm not giving this up yet. And I'm just like, Lord. Okay. And the worst part is like, all of this together is kind of like you're watching a movie, but you're in the movie this time. You know what I mean? And so I'm at the part in the movie where it's like make or break, and you're watching, I don't know, the person run from the psycho killer, and you just need them to get in the car, and go. But instead, they're running, and then they heard like a kitten, and they stop and, oh, what? Come with me. And they grab the kitten, and everything that will get them killed. So that's literally how I'm responding to what I'm seeing on the news. So when I saw like the college students and everybody else partying on the beach and then the governor of West Virginia talking about go out, go party, don't stay in the house. Like, no. And I'm annoyed because look, I done been in the house all week sitting in here talking to myself and y'all out here partying. Like, so it's kind of just, it's chaos. And then when you're talking about the leadership and the mixed messages, and on Monday everything is fine, and on Tuesday, oh, we're all gonna die, and then on Wednesday everything is good, and then this day you find out that some of the senators are crooked and they've been selling off stocks in Wall Street and too much going on, and then the economy is just collapsing, and you're just like, whew, it's almost to the point where you start getting delirious and everything just becomes funny because it's just that terrible. And so I'm really concerned for a lot of people who don't really know what their next week looks like, who don't even know if they're going to be called into work, or people who don't even know, if they're going to make it to the end of the month. And I think that's one of the other things that really kind of disturbed me, is the fact that there's so many people, especially on social media, who are just convinced that they are rich and wealthy. And they have been talking all this trash for weeks. And, oh, what do you mean? People can't make it 8 weeks. You're supposed to have 3 months of savings together. And it's like, you realize we've been living in an economy that's pretty much where you're constantly like climbing and clawing just to make the bottom line. That's how a lot of people have been living for a long time because, of course, wages have never really gotten to where they needed to be when you're talking about time progression from the 60s into 2020. The wages have not really grown that much, and the cost of living has just skyrocketed. When you're talking about the cost of tuition for college students and the fact that, the college prices and tuition have literally doubled in like the last 10 years, depending on where you go to school. And when you're talking about, the student debt and the loans and even credit card debt, and people who barely were able to afford the house that they got, and they were able to get into some kind of program, and now everything is just coming into, fruition in a terrible way. It's a very kind of scary thing. And so it was just interesting. I was looking at some of the people on social media who were talking all this trash because maybe they're like self-employed or they have a business. And I'm like, you really should take a piece of the humble pie, because in order for your business to flourish, you're going to need customers. So if your customers don't have any money, their priorities are going to be making sure that their mortgage or their rent is paid, or that their kids are fed, or that they have childcare, or that utilities are taken care of, or that the medical bills are taken care of. Because another thing that's going to happen, unfortunately, for a lot of people is they may lose their health benefits, because some companies are going to have to make the choice between, do we make payroll or do we solely make payroll and cut the benefits so we can make sure that everybody gets paid? And some companies are going to start, deciding what part-time staff we need to get rid of, or full-time staff we need to get rid of, and who's essential, who's non-essential. That's a lot of things to think about. So I think a lot of people have to step outside of themselves in this moment of chaos and really kind of just own the fact that we're in this space where we don't really know what's going on. We don't know how this is going to end. I mean, you will eventually get through it, but in the meantime, while we're going in through it, or, just going into this whirlpool of just chaos, have a little empathy for those who may be in a, worse off position than you. And, one of the craziest things is someone I knew unfortunately took their life this week. And so the funeral is a sad situation because they can't even really have a funeral because you don't want groups of people. So what the family is going to do is like a very, very small, intimate, family type thing and leave it at that. And then everybody else, if this thing passes by the summer, maybe we'll do like a large memorial or something like that. But these are real issues that people are thinking about or having to deal with. And when you talk about high school students or, who are going to miss prom most likely, or maybe not even have a graduation, it's crazy how much things can change in just 2 weeks. 2 weeks ago, at least at my center, I do this program where on every other Wednesday, I have solely just my high schoolers. And we just have like this panel discussion forum type thing where it's them and they're just, talking about different issues that affect them. And the rule within the program is that the adults, like myself and my other staff, we're not allowed to interject or give our opinion. We just have to sit and listen, and we'll moderate. So if the teenagers start getting into a really, really intense debate about, I don't know, politics or something, if it's getting to the point where somebody's ready to punch somebody in the back of the face, then that's when I jump in and say, okay, well, let's regroup. All right, everybody get a slice of pizza. Let's take a break. that's when I come in. But it was crazy because they were literally having a discussion about the election. And one of my high schoolers was talking about how, well, I'm not really into politics. I'm not really worried about that stuff. I just vote for whoever my mom tells me to vote for because, I know we're always going to be all right. Like nothing really affects us or affects me. I'm not really worried about a lot of stuff. Things happen every day, but, I'm still here and, things, look at how our life is right now. And I was like, And I wanted to jump in so bad, but I couldn't say nothing. I was like, And it's so funny because you fast forward 2 weeks later and it's like, wow, look how much everything changed with like the flip of a quarter. And mind you, this is one of my seniors. So I'm like, yeah, sir, I don't know if you're going to be having a graduation or not, but we'll cross our fingers and hope that this blows over. Hopefully before May really kicks in. But, who knows? When you have so many people who are not really... Actually, I won't even blame the people, but one, when there isn't a centralized way of addressing this, where every state, every city, every county is doing something different, and this state's saying you can do this, and this governor's saying you can do that. You have California that has totally just like shut down. New York is kind of like shut down. Maryland is pretty much one step from shut down. People in DC where I'm at, they're telling us to stay in the house, don't go out. But then you have other places where they're just now starting to somewhat acknowledge that, hey, I think there just might be a problem. I guess maybe we should do a little something. I don't know what it is, but, just, try to be careful around others. So everything's not on a full page. So with that, how do the people respond? The people respond by, you have some who are just doing, life as they know it, the way they've been doing it beforehand. And then you have others who have really just gone into like lockdown mode. They're not leaving the house and, it's like somebody knocks on the door to borrow a cup of sugar and they got to unlock 15 locks. Who is it? What's the password? I just came to borrow a cup of sugar and they about to get shot in the face. So, that's reality. But, we'll see how this goes. One of the things I did want to say is that I think one of the best things people can do while we're kind of in all of this, and I know it's probably a hard thing for some people, is try to find like a sense of normalcy and try to do things that you normally do that make you happy at least. Even if that means like, catching up with an old family member on the phone or FaceTiming somebody, or, maybe you do some arts and crafts or something, or maybe if you're like me, I'm a documentary buff. I've been watching so many documentaries the last few days. It's either been that or like making music. I like doing those two things, but trying to find things that kind of keep you sane. And also sometimes understanding that it's okay to kind of take a cue and take a break from reality for an hour or two. Like if you got to turn the news off for a little bit because it's a lot, you can do that and not feel bad about it. You know what I mean? Because again, there's so much that's going on and it's happening so fast and it's so in your face and everything is so impactful. Listen, I was scared to look at my bank account when I started seeing that stock market. Like I was like, oh Lord, boy, let me look at that crap next week. I don't even want to look at it right now. But as I said, it'll be something we get through. And boy, those are going to be some stories to tell there in like a few years. Y'all remember in 2020 when literally everything that could go wrong went wrong? It's so crazy. This is literally like the way that things just work full circle. If you've been following my podcast, the very first episode I ever did with my podcast was talking about how I graduated from college at the peak of the recession and how there were no jobs and how I had to move back home with my parents, and then everything in life that could go wrong had went wrong. And so now I'm looking at everything come back full circle, and I'm like, wow, poor class of 2020 and 2021. Like, geez. And even probably class of 2019, because unfortunately for those who may have just gotten that first career job, when these companies unfortunately start making some of these cuts, the first ones to go are the new people, unfortunately, or the people who haven't been grandfathered in. So much going on. You're looking at the airline industry somewhat collapsing. You're just looking at everything just, wow. But I hope this is also a wake-up call to really understand that, okay, when I'm saying we, I'm talking about the United States, but even globally, there has to be a shift in the way that our politics work, and there has to be a shift in just the way that the country operates and even the world operates, because you're learning and seeing the downside of greed and corporate greed. And even when it comes to capitalism, the downsides of how capitalism, disproportionately affect different groups of people for the worse. And so, we'll see where it goes. Anyway, can we move on to some other things a little bit happier? I don't know if we can do that, but we'll try. All right, moving on. Okay, so quick story time just to lead into my next story. So I think maybe this was a year ago, maybe. So I was going to the government center, for a meeting. And so I'm going into this office. It's like this big municipal government office and everything like that. And normally when I go in, there's a security guard at the front, and then there's these offices to the left with these little glass walls where you can see everybody in the office, and then on the other side there's the same thing. And so while I'm walking in, I don't really pay attention to what's happening in the offices, but I notice that the security guard is under the table for some reason. But I'm thinking, oh, he dropped something. Sometimes you're working at your desk and you drop something, and so you gotta get all the way down because you can't reach far enough, so oh my god, I got to get down on some bullshit. So I'm thinking it was something like that. So I thought nothing of it. And I keep going. I get in the elevator and I go up to the 5th floor. And then when I get to the main office where I'm supposed to be having this meeting, I notice everybody's under the tables. And I'm like, and it's so silent in the building too. I'm like, what is wrong? What's going on here? And so I see somebody I know. I'm like, wait, what's going on? Is there a shooter in here? Somebody here with a gun? Because I'm over here thinking about what cabinet I'm going to have to climb inside of and everything like that. And they're like, no. I'm like, well, what is it? What's the problem? Because I'm still not together, because everybody's just under the tables and everybody's staring at me like I'm the one person standing up all super tall. I'm not tall, but when everybody's on the ground, of course, you're a lot taller. And so everybody's just staring at me, and I'm staring back at all of them under the tables and everything. What's wrong with y'all? Somebody tell me something. And they're like, it's an earthquake drill. I was like, oh, okay. And again, it was weird to me because, had I been in Seattle, where I'm originally, the state where I'm from, it would have made sense. I would have thought, okay, they're doing an earthquake drill. But this is like the DMV. This is like DC, Northern Virginia. But there's not really earthquakes over here. So I was like, oh, okay, all right. And so, earthquake drill. But leading to my actual story, so for those in Salt Lake City, you may have realized that the people in Salt Lake City recently experienced an earthquake. It happened at 7 in the morning. It was a 5.7 on a Richter scale, which is very odd for that specific region because they don't have a lot of seismic activity. And then I think what made it worse was that the earthquake was only 6 miles underground, which is pretty much a shallow earthquake. For those who might have just listened to my last podcast episode, we definitely talked about earthquakes in that episode because I was talking about the one I experienced in 2001 when they had a 6.8 that hit Washington State. And so absolutely crazy. Fortunately, there weren't a lot of injuries or nobody really died or anything like that, which is the good thing. But again, I think something like an earthquake is scary if you live in a region where the buildings are not retrofitted for an earthquake. And I'm not really sure how Salt Lake City's infrastructure is set up, but I don't think they're probably going to be a very retrofit heavy type setup when it comes to how their buildings are set up. Plus, they also get tornadoes too. I'm like, dang, that's a lot to deal with, and absolutely crazy. But yeah, that's quite a surprise for your morning. You get woken up with an earthquake at 7 in the morning. Absolutely crazy, right? All right. Anyway, moving on. So I had no idea that this was out on Netflix, and it's crazy because we literally just talked about her on my last live video, I think last week. But there is a short series or a limited series on Netflix about Madam C.J. Walker. It's called Self-Made. It stars Octavia Spencer and Tiffany Haddish, and Blair Underwood is also in the film as well. And so far, I've been watching. So far, so good. I'm about 3 episodes in. I think there's only 4 episodes. So I'm wondering if it's going to be a continuation and maybe they'll add a few more episodes, or if they're going to try to cram everything in that 4th episode that I haven't seen yet. Who knows? I haven't seen it all. I guess my only critique, because I'm enjoying the acting, I think Octavia Spencer is doing a great job, and of course, I think the acting is really well put together, and I also like the costuming design and all that stuff. My only beef a little bit is I'm not really liking the way that they're portraying Annie Malone, and I say that because a lot of people are unfamiliar with Annie Malone to begin with, but in reality, like, she and Madam C.J. Walker both were, you know, self-made millionaires, black women who had these big giant empires in cosmetics and everything like that. And so the way that she's kind of being portrayed in this series, again, this would be through the lens of how people may have thought Madam C.J. Walker may have seen her, but I think it does a disservice to the legacy of somebody like Annie Malone, I think. And again, because they were both, you know, their own self-made millionaires, and somebody like Annie Malone used to always donate money to like Howard University School of Medicine and to like different orphanages and everything like that. So I think they have to make sure they're careful with how they portray, you know, certain individuals when, you know, trying to push a story, because sometimes when you want to show how great somebody is, you can do it without tearing down everybody else who were on the sidelines. Now, I wasn't around during that time, so maybe there's more that the people who put the film together knew than I did. But again, when it comes to entertainment, we know that with a lot of biopics and miniseries and everything like that, they'll often kind of cook the narrative to make it more entertaining. And sometimes they do it at the expense of other people who still have their own families and stuff that are out living today and, you know, have to go and defend their own family members. So I'm going to see how the fourth episode kind of wraps up. But I do think that is my one beef, is that they've made Annie Malone so one-dimensional. It's driving me crazy. Like, it's... I don't know, but we'll see. But and again, I don't want to take away from Madam C.J. Walker's story, but I do think, especially when you have two prominent black women who have had, you know, these booming careers, you want to make sure that while you're uplifting one, you're not tearing down the other just to, you know, get a story. But anyway, you guys can check it out for yourselves. Tell me what you think, and we'll probably circle back to this after I see the last episode. Anyway. And then there's Linda Fairstein, who is now suing Ava DuVernay over her portrayal in the limited series When They See Us that aired on Netflix last year. If you remember, this series pretty much took us on a journey into the lives of those that would be labeled as the Central Park Five, as well as a journey into the experience of their family members and those who worked on the case against them. Long story short, for those who may not have been familiar with the Central Park Five, you had 5 teenage males who were accused or falsely accused and convicted of raping a white woman in Central Park. And so this series pretty much just goes into detail about how they were pretty much framed and set up, and they pretty much signed plea deals admitting to something that they didn't do after being interrogated for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours. And pretty much there was an entire case that was built against them. There was no DNA or forensic evidence. And then in 2002, the actual person who committed the offense, somebody totally unrelated, actually admitted to doing it because they were already in jail forever and a day because they had already raped some other people and killed some folks. They weren't going to be getting out anytime soon. They were like, wait a minute, no, it wasn't them, it was me, I did it. And then, of course, the DNA evidence matches his story, and then they become exonerated. But by the time it was all said and done, some of them had been in jail for years upon years, some as long as like 11, 12, 13 years. And so then, boom, the story gets bigger. There's a documentary that comes out around 2012, 2013, and then in 2019 was the When They See Us series. So today, Linda Fairstein is now suing because she feels that the series painted her to be a racist. And there's a portion that she doesn't like in the film where it shows her saying that they were young black thugs or something like that. So she's suing because she's saying that she's lost work, she's lost her book deal, and she's lost publishing rights, and she has been uninvited to many events and disinvited from speaking at events, and she's had to step down from some of the boards she was on, and even as her being a college professor, she had to step down from her job, and she's no longer able to make the money that she was once making, and she just totally feels that, you know, she was painted in a terrible light. And in addition to that, in addition to suing, she also wants a public apology, and she wants a few scenes taken out of the series that paint her in a really bad light. And so for me, you know what Linda's giving me? Linda is giving me the people who go and they do very, very foolish things on camera so they can get some clout and some internet fame. So I don't know. They go and, like, one of the clips I just saw recently, what I did have a really huge problem with it. It shows like this older woman who is at the store, like, getting some quick supplies, and then somebody comes behind her and starts coughing, talking about corona, so the woman, like, just freaks out and runs out of the store, and of course they think it's funny and stuff like that. But, you know, people who make those kind of videos where they bother unsuspecting people who are minding their business, and they get a little bit of fame and clout, and they're riding the wave, and then when people start to get offended and say, no, this is a problem, this isn't cool, and everything like that, you know, they normally talk trash, like, oh, it is what it is, blah, 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 and of course, people go even further and they find out where that person works, and now that person has lost a job. Or same like with the people who say really racist statements on the internet or do something extremely terrible and everything, and they're talking all that trash, and then the minute the internet finds out where they worked, the next day they're doing the video. Oh, I apologize. this has been too much for me. I'm a human. Understand that I have a heart, so on and so forth. And I'm always like, listen, nobody told you to step on that little boy's hamster with a steel toe shoe, electric chair. I don't want to hear it. So I'm joking about the electric chair. I know somebody's going to get mad about that. But anyway, that's what Linda's giving me. And I say that because when it's all said and done, Linda led the charge. Linda rode that wave. And I'm not really going to sit here and entertain Linda being, super butthurt about whatever happened, because at the end of the day, Corey Wise exists. And the reason I'm pointing out Corey Wise is because when it's all said and done, it was no secret that Corey Wise was not even at Central Park that day when everything happened. He was not even one of the initial suspects. The police were actually going to get one of his other friends, and they, he just happened to be at the friend's house. And then they're like, oh, well, I guess if you want to come along, you can come too. We'll be back in an hour or two. And somehow, going from that position, Corey Wise ends up being not only charged, but also prosecuted and convicted and spends years and years in jail. And so for me, Linda knew that he was not one of the initial suspects. And she knew that he was not even at the park. And the fact that she would still go and press the case against him, in addition to the other four, but really with Corey Wise, the fact that she would still press a case against this kid, and he spent the most time in jail. She was so unapologetic about all of it, including how the other four were treated. And when you think about the impact that this case had on all five individuals that were charged and falsely convicted. Years in jail, families were broken apart, everything like that. And they lost time that they could never get back. And again, for me, it's just knowing that you knew Corey Wise was not even at the park that day, and you would still proceed with the case. See, that's what happens when ego overtakes integrity. Because now at this point, you're just doing, you just need to solve the case. It is what it is. We'll throw anything at the wall and hopefully, it sticks. And so for me, now you want to get mad because the money's not adding up. So how I see it is this. Pretty much, the values of your actions are now insufficient. And you're pissed off because you made all of this money off of their oppression. Because listen, when everything hit, like I said, she led the charge. She rode the wave. She was the face of this case. She was doing the talk shows and the daytime interviews and making the media rounds. And they were pushing out the narrative about, they got to really do something about the crime in this city. And these young black children are just so violent and so on and so forth. And terms like wilding. And it was so funny how they would say wilding. If you hear kids saying they're doing that, you better watch out, because there's going to be some violent thugs coming after you. And so they pushed this whole narrative. And of course, with the victim, they really painted it to be just these monsters that went and did such a horrible thing to this innocent white woman who just wanted to go for a jog. And now look what happened to her. And we have to protect our streets because these monsters, these crazy whatever, it's their fault. And it's not just them, it's all of them. But these are the five that we caught. That was the narrative that was pushed out there. And in addition to that, it got to the point where even your current president, made the statements about we need to bring back the death penalty. He took out an entire piece in the New York Times about bringing the death penalty back for children who commit vicious crimes, so on and so forth. And it was that terrible. And every time I see that article, it just makes me think of George Stinney Jr., who we've talked about a few times on this channel. But George Stinney, he was the youngest kid ever executed by the United States. He was 14, and he was accused of killing these two white girls back in the day. He didn't actually do it, but he was arrested, charged, and convicted on the same day, and then they gave him the electric chair. And the worst part about it was, because he was 14 and he was so small, he couldn't even fit in the chair. They had to stack up some Bibles, the irony, for him to sit on in order for him to, get the shot, because the headpiece, he couldn't reach the headpiece. And so it was just a terrible, terrible time for not only the Central Park Five, but their families, and even just young black youth and young Latino youth, and just the images that were put out there about a lot of kids. And I definitely would say that, the energy and the attention that went to that case definitely played a role into cases of other people who may have been charged with similar crimes. And so for me, it's like she rode the wave. She made all of this money. And I'm going back to my statement about the values of her actions having, being insufficient. She made all this money from that action, because when the case was a wrap, when they were convicted, she was paraded around. She really did the media interviews then. And, she's a hero. She's leading the charge. She's helping to make New York safe again, so on and so forth. And so she's doing the book tours and the public speaking engagements and the interviews and the radio this and the newspaper article that and the magazine cover this and all of that. And she made a pretty penny off of somebody else's oppression. There's 5 individuals sitting in jail for a crime that they did not commit. They're sitting in jail. Their families are, going through all kind of turmoil and everything like that. And she's just racking up the checks, living large, living good. And then literally now, because the tide changed around 2002 when they were exonerated. And then there was the documentary that came out, and then the series came out, and a lot of people said, whoa, wait a minute. So you mean to tell me this, that, and that happened, and this is how, oh, whoa, wait. So these kids, there was no DNA evidence or forensic evidence, and they weren't even at the park, and the story doesn't align, and this, that, and third, and they still pushed to convict these kids? Okay. Wow. And so now that the money is not coming in, because this is all oppression money, in my opinion. This is all some dark money right here, some blood money. That's what you want to call it. The blood money is no longer coming in, and you're pissed off. So now you want to sue because somebody like Ava DuVernay, worked on a project to help kind of rechange the narrative and put the truth out about how things were really, going down during that time period. And so now you're pissed because your money's funny. And so you want to sue. And not only that, you want a public apology. And it's like, wait, so you want a public apology because you think that the series made you look racist, and you haven't even apologized to the families. I can't. Boy. Jeez. And so the other aspect about all of it is the fact that I always think of the conversation that exists around people who are in prison. Because there's a narrative that anybody who's in prison is a terrible, terrible person. Because honestly, even on all of the videos that I've done about the Central Park 5, there's always somebody who jumps in and says, I don't know why y'all are so mad. They did it. They should have admitted to it if they didn't do it. That's what it is. You don't admit to doing something like that. Blah, 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 blah. And I'm just like, again, it showcases the flaws that exist within our judicial system. Because we know that 97% of those who have been convicted of a federal felony did not, well, I'm not going to say they did not do it, but they at least took a plea deal. And so when you're talking about plea deals, just think about it. If you have 97% of people who are in prisons, they're in there by a plea deal, not because they were convicted, but a plea deal. And the thing about plea deals is a plea deal does not always mean somebody's guilty. A lot of times a plea deal is just more so convenient because a family may not be able to afford a good lawyer. And sometimes the odds of them getting off, even if they did not do the crime, even if they didn't commit the offense, the gamble of, facing 20 years versus maybe getting a 2-year suspended sentence and some probation, when you have to make that choice between, am I going to provide for my family, or am I going to, have my mother mortgage her house and everything else like that, so she can afford the bond and so on and so forth. Like, that's the reality. When you talk about people who are convicted of all kind of, not even convicted, but who are charged with a bunch of crimes and they can't afford the lawyer and they get the public defender, sometimes the public defender doesn't even know the name of the person they're representing. Mainly because public defenders, those offices are so overwhelmed with so many clients, they're not really able to do their jobs effectively. I think there are some public defenders who actually do try, but a lot of them are just in there. It is what it is. Here's a plea deal. Let's just get to the next one. Let's get, if I can just get this stack on my desk to get a little lower, I might be able to breathe a little bit by Saturday. So plea deal, plea deal, plea deal, and plea deal. And it just makes me think, I had a cousin who ended up in a situation where they were charged with, it was like armed robbery or something like that. And really what it was just he was in the wrong place at the wrong time with the wrong crowd. Now, some backstory with his situation was he also had a learning disability. He had like a brain injury when he was younger. He slipped and fell playing basketball, hit his head on the concrete, was never the same. And so what really ended up happening was that the crowd he was running with commits this offense, and they pretty much team up and say, well, if we blame him, he's not going to be able to articulate anything, and he doesn't really understand how anything works. He'll admit to it, or, so they all turned the tide and painted him to be the aggressor. And the crazy part was, like, there's no forensic evidence with anything, no fingerprints, no anything to tie him to what the crime was. But unfortunately, and mind you, he was 16 or 17 at the time, when he was apprehended, of course, there's no representation. And of course, I find out about all of this after the fact, but there's no representation, there's no anything. And somebody with a learning disability who's just not able to process that kind of information the way that it's being presented to them, he had already confessed to everything. And I'm like, what? And so then, and for him, he was saying like, well, they were telling me I was going to face like 10, 15 years, but they told me I would go home within like a year and a half if I just signed this paper. And so boom. And so that's the experience for a lot of people, where people end up having to just, they take a plea or they do whatever they need to do because they recognize that the risk of going to trial, there's no guarantee that even if they didn't do the crime, there's no guarantee that a jury of their peers, which most of the time that jury is not their peers, that jury has already seen the case, or even if they're sequestered, if they have a certain perspective about that individual based on how they look and so on and so forth, there's no guarantee that that bias or even that implicit bias will not impact what happens in that case. And so you have so many people who will go and take a plea deal because at the end of the day, they would rather just have that on their record and sit in jail for 2 or 3 years as opposed to 20 or 25. And so with Linda, I'm not trying to hear anything about, what she has lost, because all that money and everything that you gained was off of the downfall of somebody else. And again, ego over integrity. You let your ego get in the way of you doing your job effectively. And again, that's just the prime example of mediocrity. Again, mediocrity in this country is always celebrated. Some of the most mediocre people, when it comes to their skill set, talent, they're the most rewarded all the time. And so by her pretty much piecing together a half-done case, just so, you can just get the case done, you get rewarded and paraded around and book deals and everything else, and now you want to sue because you done lost it all. You were in the wrong to begin with. But of course, because there are voices that are never heard within the society, and you have disenfranchised groups of people who will always be, pushed to the back in order to uplift somebody else who doesn't even deserve to be in the position that they're in, I don't want to hear it. Plus, in reality, listen, if she really, 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 really needs a job, she can always just go work for the Trump administration. I know they'll hire her. Shoot, she'll probably be over to the Department of Justice once Barr gets out of there. Save it. Linda, log all the way off, because you have not a leg to stand on. Nobody wants to hear that. The nerve. Lord, I thought we were going to do happy stories, but there's nothing happy to talk about. Then Andrew Gillum. Okay. I'll say this, I'm not going to judge him on any of his actions, because listen, people got all kind of skeletons and people got all kind of things that they do behind the scenes that we never know about, because don't think he's the only one as far as politicians who are caught doing certain things and so on and so forth. And again, I don't know the full details of what happened. We've gotten kind of bits and pieces, and people have tried to piece together a narrative. For me, I'm not pressed about what happened. It is what it is. He's going to have to deal with that with himself and his family. But the issue I have more so is the fact that now there have been pictures that have been leaked by prominent blog sites and some public figures. And I think that's the foul part about all of it. It's one thing to report on what happened. I understand that. People want to, bring traffic to their blogs and whatever else they have. I understand that. But then I think there still has to be an element of consideration for somebody's well-being and their mental state. Imagine what that must be like if you're somebody who maybe there was something you didn't want out, and now it's out in front of the whole world. And I know people are going to say, well, he made that choice and he stepped out and so on and so forth. I hear all of that. I totally do. But imagine if something that maybe you didn't want out gets out there, right? And so there's millions and millions of people who now know this information. And then in addition, as the final kick, boom, here's some pictures. Boom, surprise, guys. And I haven't seen the pictures. I don't want to see. But apparently from what I was being told is okay, well, he's not wearing any clothes. And I think there's feces on the floor or vomit or something like that. And so he's in a very compromising, position with what they're saying are in the pictures. And so for me, I just think for those bloggers that put that out there, where is the integrity about how you publish your information? Because again, this is still somebody who has a family. I believe he has children and everything else as well. And so they can't escape that. And I know the responsibility is also on Andrew Gillum. He would have to make better choices, because I think a lesson that is to be learned is that everybody does not have your best interest in mind. And you do have to mind who you associate yourself with. And it's also a lesson to be learned that everybody, like I said, is not who you think they may be on the outside or on the inside. So you have to be careful with the kind of people you allow in your presence, especially if you're going to do things that put you in a compromising position or put you in a position where, things can get out that may not portray you in the best light. And so I thought it was so tacky that, certain blog sites would go and put that out there, especially at a time like this. There's enough stuff going on. The man was already down, and I'm hoping he's not suicidal or something, because we've seen so many people who end up in similar situations take their own lives, and that's before pictures leak. So, imagine there's all these rumors and everything else out about this individual, and this is a very political kind of thing, because he's really catching it from certain pundits and public figures, because it helps to push their own narratives and really paint he and those in his party to be extremely irresponsible and irrational, and that's why things need to be a certain way. And you also see the double standard with how he's being treated in comparison to other people who have literally ended up in similar boats as well. But again, to those publications that decided to put those kind of pictures out, I'm I hope you got the hits you were looking for, but I think it tarnishes the brand of whatever it is you were trying to portray, because it's there's no limit to how low some will go in order to get, that big story. So, I kind of feel bad for his family, and I feel bad for the guy as well. I know people are going to say, well, he needed to make better choices, and I get that, but I think, the choices that he made are choices that a lot of people make, but the difference is a lot of people are not public figures. So when their dirt is exposed, it's not exposed in front of millions. Or even if it's exposed, or if it may not even get exposed, their dirt just might, it stays their dirt. So imagine, you're in this vulnerable position, and boom, millions of people are watching now. Like, crazy. Anyway, we need to wrap this up. One of the things I did do, though, because I know this has been a really weird time period for a lot of people. If you follow me, I have a bunch of links in my description to the list of books behind me, and to my music or my podcast, and then just music in general for people who like playlists. I did make a playlist for people who just need something to bring them here, calm their nerves, keep them in a space of serenity. So the playlist is at the very bottom of this description for those who may need it. And then again, just for those who have to go out and go shopping, or go to different pharmacies and everything, please just have some consideration for those who are working in those positions, the cashiers and the pharmacists, and the people who are really, because some of those people are starting to get very unconventional hours and everything to kind of keep different companies afloat and everything like that. And so especially the people working at grocery stores, they've probably seen every extremity when it comes to different personalities over the last few days. So please don't give the people who work in food service or in any kind of service that we utilize, please don't give them a hard time. They've already been through enough. So even if they don't have the best attitude or energy, just consider what their day has been like, or their week, and the fact that they don't even know if their job is still secure. So it is what it is. But anyway, let's catch up, let's cross our fingers and hope that things get better sooner than later. But it is what it is. Anyway, I'm out. Subscribe.
See, because when you're on one page and I'm on the same page, we're talking about.
Cause when it gets down to the wire,